It's sort of the whole idea of, it's better that the body be killed and the soul be preserved. And that's not exactly what the Bible verse says, but that's sort of the idea. Augustine said you can love your enemy and kill them because sometimes killing is love. You are actually perhaps saving that person from eternal damnation by stopping them. Because remember, to Augustine, only one side is just and one is unjust. So if you're on the just side, these people, your adversaries, are committing a sin by engaging in war, period. Okay, so that's what Augustine said. It was this killing is love. It was clearly a paradox. Very interesting view. Aquinas, and of course, that you're killing, but you're loving. You are bearing the sword of God when you kill, because you are on the just side. You are on the Christian side. Okay. And Aquinas didn't, he didn't flesh this out a whole lot, but he did talk about this, and this was clearly what he believed, was this idea that so realize for Aquinas, this is a focus on the individual soul, the individual sanctification. Did I say Aquinas? Mm-hmm. I mean Augustine, as you probably know. Okay, moving forward to Aquinas, again, good 800 years later. Aquinas says, first of all people are to be loved equally. Okay, so this is not new. This is scriptural. This is Augustine. Sinners, non-sinners, the adversary, the friend, all are to be loved equally. However, we are not required to show our love to all equally. All right. Start to notice this is a little bit different. Aquinas says to do that would be what he would call the perfection of charity, which is not attainable in this world, nor is it to be considered obligatory, particularly in war. He says, and I'm going to quote him, although we should be ready to love our enemies individually if the necessity were to occur, nevertheless, it is not necessary for salvation that we actively show love to our enemies. All right, yes?
Where is that from? There was much of that.
I can't remember. In fact, I can look it up and find out. It probably was in the of murder section, but I can't remember for sure. Okay. The good news about Aquinas is if you want to look this up or Google it, he didn't write a whole lot about this, so it would be pretty easy to find. I'm sure it was in the Summa Theologica. But what you have here then is this idea that we can love and kill our enemies. This is what Aquinas would say. But it's not that we're inflicting a loving punishment on our enemies. It's that we're loving them but failing to show that love. Okay.
It's kind of a lawyer sort of.
Sure.
I love you.
Right. Well, right. But you see the difference there. I'm loving you, but I'm failing to show that love. Now, by doing that, yeah, absolutely. But by doing that, the paradox goes away. I think the paradox goes away of you're loving them, but you're killing them. Instead, Aquinas says you don't have to love your enemy in the sense that the church fathers and that Augustine is talking about, where you're loving them by killing them. Instead, it's not obligatory to love. It's obligatory, in fact, sometimes to fight. There can be a duty to fight. And I can't remember if we got to this last week. We might have a little bit, but Aquinas talks about how sometimes you can catch his sense of humor, and I might have been a good idea to include this in the outline, but I didn't. Aquinas says, hold on, I think I have it on this outline. It's really kind of humorous. Here it is. Remember that Aquinas did not think self-defense was bad. He thought it was fine. He also thought it was perfectly fine to not show self-defense. That's also a good thing. In fact, that would be the perfect thing to do, but it's not always required. And at one point he said, although it may be more perfect to resist evils done to oneself, it may be a matter of vice if one refrains from tolerating patiently the wrongs done to others. So
That's kind of pathetic.
What's that?
That's kind of pathetic. You're letting somebody else go around killing people when
Right.
you're not doing it.
That's exactly what he's saying. When we talk about tolerating patiently the wrongs done to us, well, that seems to be Christian, and that's certainly taught in Scripture. But Aquinas is saying tolerating patiently the wrongs done to others, well, that's a vice.
And that would defy Scripture too, where there is no higher good than giving up your life for your brothers. So particularly in the context of defending other Christians.
Yeah, good point.
Right. And Aquinas takes that not only in just defending others on the street, but in the notion of warfare, in the notion of protecting the state when you're called up by a sovereign.
It's also part of a lot of honor codes. To of the academy, Mary Washington, for example, has to sign an honor code in which they say they will not tolerate anybody who does these wrongs.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
Yeah,
I
that's-
mean, you know, 5 colleges among the 6 kids,
Right.
and 4 of them required honor statements like that.
Right.
West Point.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing to weave in.
West Point.
That's right, yeah, West Point, I don't know about the other academies, but
Huh?
right, this
Same.
idea that you won't tolerate those who
Same.
do.
Maybe like only has honor concept in which
Mhm.
it's just like West Point's, except there's not a requirement
Okay.
to turn in.
Right.
It leaves discretion to the individual.
Right,
But
right,
the
and
end
that,
is that will not lie, cheat, or steal.
right, that's how it used to be at
The
West
The
Point.
Air Force was, in fact, will not tolerate anyone among us
Yeah,
who does.
who are tolerated amongst those who do that. That's the difference between the Naval Academy and the other two larger
Yeah, there's
military.
They're obligated to
they
turn them
will
in.
not tolerate.
Right, right. So this is a, get back to the outline I'm using here. Yeah, this is the idea, again, we're talking about love and killing. This idea that at times, it's not a focus on the individual. Okay, it's not that I am loving this person by killing him. It's more of a focus, again, on what? The good of society. We are taking this person out of society, we're killing this person for the good of society, and we're not showing active love towards them. It doesn't mean we're not loving them.
Looks like socialism.
I'm sure Aquinas would disagree with that, but I don't know. I'd have to think about that. But the interesting thing, again, that you see is how Christians, philosophers, are wrestling with this concept of the Beatitudes.
Well, there's so many things that seem contradictory that can pop up in there. I mean,
Right.
you know, on the one hand, the injunction against any kind of violence. On the other hand, Christ says in Luke 22, you know, if you've got a purse, go buy a sword, because tough times are coming, be ready to take it to them.
That's a good point, and I'm going to skip way ahead to something that is outside of Aquinas because you bring this up, and that is the how to reconcile verses of Scripture. The Soldier's Pocket Bible. This is actually your very
It's
last bullet
fascinating to
point.
see that.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read
Back
this
away.
quote because I think that, again, we're talking about how do philosophers, how do, really what it gets down to it, how do commanders and how do soldiers, how do leaders, how do this commander-in-chief reconcile, if you take Scripture seriously, how do you reconcile scriptural passages that seem to, and this is again the pacifism movement of today, asking the same questions. How do you reconcile these verses of Scripture that seem to say, turn the other cheek, that seem to say, you cannot fight in a war? The Soldier's Pocket Bible, this was for England, 1643. I'm just going to read it to you, and this is a passage just all together. Matthew 5:44. But I say unto you, love your enemies. 2 Chronicles 9:19-2. Wouldest thou help the wicked and love them that hate the Lord? Psalm 139:21-22. Do I not hate them, O Lord, that hate thee? I hate them with an unfeigned hatred, as they were mine utter enemies. And then it goes on to say, the soldier must love his enemies as they are his enemies, and hate them as they are God's enemies. So you see how sort of in the Soldier's Pocket Bible of England, it brings out the verse in Matthew. No doubt this was an issue. This had to be because they bring it out. And then it responds with some of these verses in the Old Testament talking about hating those that hate God and the difference between your own enemies and the enemies of God. So yes, the same thing that Aquinas was doing, the same thing that Augustine was doing. But this killing is love is an interesting
There's another
paradox.
dimension of that. I know some Roman Catholics who are opposed to the war in Iraq because they don't extend that perimeter of brotherhood to Iraqis. You understand what I'm saying? They don't want to give American lives for Iraqis.
Yeah, so that-
Even Iraqi Christians, they cannot justify going into Iraq and sacrificing or putting American lives in danger to better their system, a regime change. So it's more nationalistic. The boundary is nationalistic. I would do that if somebody, attacked my home. I would defend my family, but I just don't extend that perimeter of brotherhood out to Iraqis. So our intervention there is ipso facto immoral.
Okay, so how does that fit in with all of us are created in God's image?
Yeah, it doesn't to them. I'm pointing out the paradox here.
Yeah.
They draw kind of an arbitrary line there.
I don't think
want
that's-
Americans going and dying for Iraqis. Well, that's a purely nationalistic view.
It sounds like they're working backwards in the logic.